Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner, where each month we bring you a new fly pattern to give a try to on our Central Oregon lakes and rivers. In addition to showing you how to tie each pattern, I'll feature fishing technique tips and tricks, and I'll cover some of the entomology behind each pattern to help gain a better understanding of the bugs that we're trying to imitate. I have field tested each of the patterns that I feature each month to make sure that they catch fish. I'll cover tying instructions for the fly as well as materials to help you be able to recreate these patterns on your own vise. For this month's pattern, I'm going to tie a composite looped soft hackle Callibaetis. I fish soft hackle Callibaetis in a lot of our area lakes, like Lava Lake and East Lake and Crane Prairie and Paulina occasionally. It's a very, very effective pattern to cast out on an intermediate sink line and strip back relatively slowly. It's a good pattern for trailing behind a woolly bugger when you're wind drifting over the hump at East Lake and other situations. This month I'm featuring some new techniques. This is actually a composite loop soft hackle, and by composite loop it means I'm blending materials together to form the soft hackle on this fly. I'm taking a little whiting hen saddle and some CDC, and I'm going to blend them together in a dubbing loop using some new tools that I've recently acquired, and I'll show you some new techniques as we do this. The CDC will help capture those little air bubbles in the emergent mayfly and give your fly a more realistic silhouette in the water. So let's cover the materials I'll use on this pattern. I'll cover them one by one so you get an idea of why I selected each. For a hook, I'm going to use a Firehole 718 in size 14 to 16. This is a curved barbless competition hook. It's extended length, so it works well with a Callibaetis mayfly nymph pattern. For thread, I'm going to use Danville's 6/0 in tobacco brown. I'm going to weight this fly with about a half a dozen turns of .015 lead wire. I don't want to weight it heavily, but I do want to add just a little bit of weight to help the fly sink slowly. For the tail, I'm going to use a small clump of natural lemon wood duck flank feathers. For the rib, I'm using a little bit of polar flash in a pearlescent color. For the abdomen dubbing, I'm using a Zelon dubbing in Hydropsyche tan that I get from Blue Ribbon Flies in Montana. For the thorax, I'm using a blend of dubbing. I've got some superfine in Callibaetis, and it's a little darker than the abdomen dubbing, and I'll mix that with about 20 to 25% UV ice dub in Callibaetis. For the hackle, let me introduce you to the two new tools I'm using. I've got a dubbing spinner from Loon, and this is a weighted dubbing spinner, and that's important to help spin that dubbing and hold it taut in your dubbing loop. Secondly, I've got a Swiss CDC Clamp that I'll demonstrate, and this helps hold the hen saddle feather and CDC together as I clip it off and put it into the dubbing loop. So I think you'll like seeing both these tools and how they're used. For the hackle, I'm using a whiting freshwater streamer. This is a hen saddle in mottled gray, and I'm going to blend that with a dark Pardo CDC feather. I'm going to blend the fibers of the CDC and the hen saddle together to form that hackle or soft hackle on this pattern in a composite loop. So let's get started tying the composite loop soft hackle Callibaetis. I'm going to begin by tying about a half a dozen wraps of 0.015 lead wire. So once I've got the lead wire wraps in place, I'm going to bind it down by wrapping my thread first in front and then behind and then over the lead just to bind it in place and keep it from moving. So now I've taken a small clump of lemon wood duck and I'm going to tie that in right behind the lead wire and wind it back to the tail set position. And then I'll fold over the butts back over the top of that abdomen area to begin building a little bit of body to lessen that goiter that exists where the lead wire is. I'll try and streamline out that little bump. So now I've taken one strand of my polar flash and I'll tie that in back to the tail and reserve that for the abdomen ribbing. So now we're going to tie in our abdomen dubbing. So I'll spin that dubbing onto the thread relatively loosely to start, and then I'll gradually tighten it up so I can build a nice tapered body back in the abdomen area. And then I'll immediately go ahead and take my polar flash and wind that forward in ribbing wraps with about 4 to 5 wraps up to the forward of the abdomen. So next I'm going to take my blend of Callibaetis Superfine and Callibaetis UV Ice Dub in about a 75% 25% mixture, a little darker than the abdomen, and I'm going to use this to tie in the thorax of this pattern. So next I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch wide stretch of my whiting hackle, and I'll marry that up or match that up to a CDC feather, and I'll try and even up those tips, and then I'll embed that into my Swiss CDC clamp, and then I can cut off the excess and leave just a tag end in the clamp that I can use to insert into my dubbing loop. So it's important to get this clamp set up and ready to go before you tie your dubbing loop onto the hook. So now that I've got it ready, I'll tie in a dubbing loop. I'm going to attach my dubbing spinner to that dubbing loop, and I'll use a finger to hold open the loop while I insert the Swiss clamp and the butt ends, and I'll capture those with the thread and hold that taut with my finger onto the clamp, and go ahead and release the clamp, and so I'm ready to spin that dubbing loop. So now I'll give that dubbing spinner a good hard spin and get that spinning around to capture those fibers and turn them into a hackle fiber that we can use to hackle this soft hackle. You can see that really catch hold and spin forward, and that really puts tension and pressure on the butts of the fibers, and it'll keep them in that loop very effectively. Now I like to release the dubbing spinner at this point and put that loop in my hackle pliers. I find it a little easier to tie forward. So I'm going to bend and fold all those fibers backwards like I would on a normal soft hackle, and then we'll wind a couple of wraps to create this soft hackle on the fly. And I'll tie that off and tie in the head to finish. And lastly, I will whip finish the head. I like to put a little bit of glue, and that'll seal this head permanently. And then finally, let me spin this fly around in the vise so you can see all sides of it. The Composite Loop Soft Hackle Callibaetis, really a good pattern. I hope you've enjoyed learning some new techniques, and we'll give this one a try. So that has been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. I hope you've enjoyed the Composite Loop Soft Hackle Callibaetis. Give this one a try up on East Lake. Wind drifting the hump next year. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this YouTube page and check us out on Facebook at Sunriver Anglers. Thanks for watching.